It was just a whole mess.
Who was the doc for the expired nails?
Kevin Friedman down in Bryn Mawr. He so I was I was Andy's associate, and I was probably only about few months in, and he says, "Go right ahead, go in the bachelor party or whatever." And then he calls me up and he says, "Hey, I'm really sorry. There's a distal femur and there's a DFN going on. It's like, go do the distal or the DFN with Dr. Friedman. You'll be in and out, no problem. Everything's there." And this was before we had the Metro office, right? So it was kind of in, somebody's garage. I show up, nails are expired. He lit me up. I mean, lit me up. So never made that mistake again, that's for sure.
I bet.
Yeah.
And who caught the labeling? Was it a nurse or a rep or you somebody?
No, it was me. So
Oh, okay.
so yeah, that was basically the last podcast. I said, the horror story in the OR, and everybody has one, and instantly when you say that, you go back to that moment. And so this was, 20 years ago, and so I wasn't even supposed to be there. I was literally at a bachelor party on a golf course, and he calls me and he says, "Hey, I'm really sorry. Can you get up there and cover the case?" I was like, "Yeah, sure." He's like, "Everything's there. You're fine." So I walk in, marching. This is only the second time I was in this account ever, and that happens. And so, long story short, um, he calls for a Midas Rex. He was going to cut it. Ultimately, he didn't. He did, put in something else, and then they banned me from the hospital. I was
Wow.
like, I didn't even do anything. I just showed up.
Do they have your picture in the hallway?
All right, seriously, they must have. The funny thing is, we've interacted years later, and I tell him that story, and we have a laugh over it. And he's like, "Did I really do?" I was like, "Yes, you did." So, oh well, good learning experience.
Yeah, everybody's got those stories. This is open discussion today. So
Okay. Well, I have a
any
story of the
go
one
for it.
time in
Go for it.
21 years, one time that I had an orthopedic surgeon upset with me in 21 years. And of all the people, now I'm home here in New Orleans, but I was living in Philly and I was doing a story about post-Katrina recovery. And I interviewed the chair of LSU, the chair of this. When I did a follow-up story, the gentleman who was the chair of LSU at the time was furious with me. I laid out my case and I said, well, this is, I never ever go to press without checking with the doc. And so somebody said to me, "Ah, it was probably just because there's a horrible Tulane LSU rivalry." And I said, that's probably true. He actually wrote to somebody AOS and all of this. And, I thought, goodness. And the funny thing is, years later, I was hired by LSU to write their ortho newsletter. And they have a new chair. And he wanted me to interview this guy. And the guy's charming and
Uh-oh.
lovely. And I didn't say a word about, hey, I was the one. You know, we've just had a great time ever since.
Funny.
That's awesome.
One time, that's it. In 21 years, I had a different
Well,
interaction with an
yeah,
orthopedic surgeon. It's pretty good.
but you remember it.
Yeah, I do. I do. I thought, what is he saying? What?
I was a young engineer. I was at Mayo Clinic back in the good old days when you could just bring an instrument in and try it without any quality system. And the surgeon puts the instrument into total knee, doesn't work, throws it at me. It's all bloody. I catch it. And he says, "This doesn't work. Bring something back that works in a couple of weeks." And boy, did I remember that forever.
Um,
Yeah. In the good old days,
Well,
you put the instrument in your suitcase and you just went to surgery. Yeah.
remember when you used to be able to flash things too?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Just
Well,
just in time.
so
But
do we want to use some of this time to brainstorm topics for future Bone Chats?
anything you want to do. This is your time, everybody. So I know Vinay wants to say something. We'll carve out 5 minutes for him. But anything else? Open topic. We'll
Yeah,
line.
well, I just threw that out there. Let Vinay go first, no problem.
Oh, okay, thank you. I just had wanted to make an announcement to the group here, and I was I would have to make it a couple of more times, as you know, just to increase my reach to this group. But I've set up a new consultancy, which is, provides clinical and regulatory services, and we are focusing on providing services to startups and small companies who could benefit from our background. So we are a it's put together by me, but I have these engagement partners, and together we have a combined experience of more than 150 years. So I have uh, orthopedic surgeon and a cardiothoracic surgeon as a medical advisors, and a leading statistical SME, and then two of us who used to work at Smith and Nephew before in the clinical department. So between us, we are looking to provide clinical strategy and regulatory strategy services, helping startups, drive their clinical programs and address pretty much end-to-end clinical and regulatory goals. And beyond that, once beyond 510(k), PMA, um, but also addressing reimbursement or market adoption activities like evidence generation and then publications, uh, podium presentations. So anything that we can help with. So if you anyone of you know who can benefit from our services, then please refer our name to us, and I'll put together the name of the website here. You all can see it, view it, and also welcome to visit my LinkedIn page. I have a page for the consultancy there as well, and I'm trying to post stuff regularly out there. So would be nice if you can follow it, and I will be happy to send out invites to all of you.
Perfect. And I really like the tagline in Vinay's group. It's we simplify clinical and regulatory complexity. I really like that.
Yeah. Yeah, and we have some in the from the past experience uh, we can put together some very cost-effective data capture studies. These are not traditional clinical trials, so we can work directly with clinics, surgeons, and hospitals to put together to capture the data. And it is the data that you would capture in a clinical trial, but it's just not your traditional clinical trial.
It's like mostly post-market
Post
analysis.
market, yeah, and especially needs like reimbursement or case studies or putting together outcomes, white papers, abstracts, and publications. So very very beneficial in those applications.
There seems to be a trend towards economic analysis, not only clinical. So you guys do that too, right, Vinay? You
Yes.
capture capture
Yeah, we can
costs.
capture. Yeah, we can capture, health economic aspects, all associated with the procedures and instruments, and also compare with the competition out there if we have access to it. But yeah, pretty much whatever is available within the electronic medical records with these surgeons and clinics and hospitals, we can work with that data and produce evidence pieces.
Perfect. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Tiger.
Yeah. There's everything that needs clinical data now, or economic data. It's incredible. Used to be clinical data just to get past, your regulatory clearance, but now it's just continuous.
Funny
Yeah.
thing is they require it, but in the end it's not the final decision driver. It's just a hoop you have to go through to get to the decision driver.
Exactly. It's a check the box for a lot of people. Yeah. Um, but it's still necessary. So what's up next? Tell me, let's just go around the table. Tell everybody what you did in the last week. That'll be interesting.
Well, I can start. I don't mind starting. I have spoken to a lot of companies in orthopedics and other healthcare specialties, And I would say there are, there's a lot of really fantastic companies out there with very promising products, but right now it's just hard to match up the founders and management teams' expectations with the capital markets. They're just out of sync with each other. It's really a factor of, some of it related to valuations and perception of valuations. Others are related to timing. Companies think they can get this done quickly, not going to happen. And so there's just a lot of mismatch in expectations. And, I find myself thinking, how do I work to resolve that mismatch in expectations? And it's difficult. It's like a reality check. And I think to some degree, companies have to go out there and just learn that it's, learn through experience.
So, Colleen, has it been that the expectations of the entrepreneurs have shifted so much, or is it just this sort of recent change in the environment and people being hesitant with the funds?
Yeah, I think the macro environment obviously isn't helping, but there are still, investors that are, writing checks, and it's like, management teams, some of them are stuck in this mindset from, 4 years ago or 5 years ago where, capital was somewhat easier. Let's put the pandemic aside. So maybe 6 years ago, when because a lot of these companies had done rounds pre-pandemic. And so I think that their experience was it was a lot easier to get things done. The costs of getting things done were lower. And the valuations were actually, probably overinflated then. So I do think it's more that than anything else. So companies aren't starting soon enough to go out and look for a capital raise. They're, setting, when they do get some meetings with investors, their valuation expectations are, kind of turning investors off in a way. Even though they say they're flexible, I think that that's not always helpful enough, right? When you're asking for a really high valuation.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. I think a lot of founders I talk to they still think it's 2019.
Yeah.
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 And the world's changed dramatically, and the money's expensive now and money's tight, and the valuations we will eventually mean correct back to the middle again, but right now valuations are way lower than they were before, and it's hard to get money, and they're getting their family and friends and a little bit of grant here or there. The people are just nibbling on things instead of having big rounds, it seems like.
Yeah, I think that this whole macro environment is affecting healthcare more than other industries. For instance, we just closed a $50 million deal for a clean hydrogen company.
Wow.
And so, I think in other sectors, there's a little bit less uncertainty. With RFK Jr.'s, comments on, driving down the cost of healthcare and some of the uncertainties around, how are tariffs affecting things and what's going on, what direction our economy is going in. I think that is really being felt in orthopedics and healthcare more than a lot of other industries.
Yeah, I think people underestimate the macro. I remember a VC told me once that in the 1990s, he said a shaved ape could make money at a VC firm. You could throw a dart, you could throw 10 or 20 darts, and you'd have a few home runs, and it's just too easy in the 1990s. And then 2008, everything changed, and then it changed again in May of 2022 is when everything flipped.
Yeah.
Yeah, macro is important. I don't know how long this is going to go along, but FDA uncertainty, trade, tariff uncertainty, cost of borrowing money is ridiculously high. I don't know when it's going to change. Anybody have anything to add on funding?
The cost of borrowing money is really interesting. Probably like many, I get constantly contact about, external financing opportunities, and it's, that, and it's hilarious when you look at them, and I don't bother looking at them in any detail anymore. But, loss leading numbers, and then when you actually look at it, it's like 14%, 15%. The numbers are just crazy. So access to capital is a real challenge.
Yeah, it really is. So you either got to get to profitability as fast as possible, or somehow extend your runway. Tough time.
I mean, even grants certainly, from the sources that were typically available in the US are, completely uncertain now. So
it's the same's happening in the UK, believe it or not. Yeah. So we've had several grants from the UK government through the Innovate program, and start of the year, because of changes in leadership in the UK government, that funding source has been cut back as well, and they've not committed to even yet to what it's going to be for this year. Should have been announced in April, but yeah, that's significantly cut, not dissimilar to the US. So same challenges for UK entrepreneurs.
Yeah, one thing I would add is that it's not only like the economic perspective. I think from the innovation standpoint as well, the gap that you need to have to your competitors to be attractive to a venture capitalist, it has been getting higher and higher and higher. So you because of all of the macro and the way healthcare is going, unless you have a product that's 10x, investors are going to be less interested in putting money and betting on it. So there has been more due diligence. It's probably associated to all of the macro stuff, but it feels like before you would pitch something that is reasonably within their thesis and they would be all over it. Now it's like you have to really prove how you are going to take the market, or how you're going to win, or how you're going to make them their money back.
Yeah, I keep hearing family offices are the best place to go right now. They're probably less sophisticated, and they a lot of times have an emotional tie to some medical problem.
One, and they also kind of have, there's times where they've had an outcome and they need to deploy cash, right?
Mhm.
It's just different dynamics in a family office. So yeah, I think that they can move faster. They're a little bit more independent and not as, kind of tuned into what everyone else is necessarily doing. They kind of work on their own schedule a bit more.
So, Colleen, on that note, I have heard from a few different people over the past couple of months that family offices are also a little more patient than the VCs.
Yeah.
That they're not kind of constantly crawling up your butt, trying to looking at the results, and appreciate that it will take time. Is that something you've?
Yeah, we've observed that as well. They are more patient. So on the front end, they can move faster. Whereas I think the trend with VCs right now is to string out the getting to know you or diligence phase over such a long period of time, that it's very painful, right? You spend a lot of time and effort investing in a particular relationship. At the end of the day, they say, yeah, well, not yet, right? So I think you get a faster answer from a family office as to yes or no. And then if it's a yes, I think they can actually, close in a reasonable amount of time. And then they're really partners more than, they're not necessarily looking for a quick exit.
No, thank you.
Colleen,
Go ahead.
Colleen, do you see family offices investing in pre-revenue startups?
It depends. There are some family offices that will, right? I mean, I wouldn't use that as a general statement, that they're interested in pre-revenue or early stage. It really depends on the family office.
So what's the usual trend? Like, when do you usually see them? I was talking to a one family office regarding a company who is planning to raise Series A, but then even at Series A, the company is not going to have any revenue. It's only early clinical studies. Um, but what they told was they don't invest in pre-revenue. Um, so I
Yeah,
was just wanting to know if that is a trend or is this.
I don't know that it's a trend. I think it's more, most family offices have an investment thesis, and that'll be either an industry focus or a stage focus, or a geography focus. So
Size focus.
I
Yeah.
mean, there are thousands and thousands of family offices. So finding the one, that's one of the reasons, why we feel companies that should work with us, because we can get them exposure to the right type of family office. The thing about family offices is they are hard to get to, right? They're harder than, I mean, in VCs, you can look at PitchBook, and there's some other types of information you can purchase. Family offices are a little bit harder to suss out which is the right one.
I've got for what it's worth, I've got a list of hundreds and probably thousand family offices that Ted Bird shared. I can throw it up on Glue if anybody's on Glue, and after the call.
Yeah, I mean, why not, right? It might
Yeah,
help.
Yeah,
who knows?
yeah, would be
But
good to see that.
Colleen makes a good point. Every investor has a different thesis, a different tolerance for risk, a different area they're interested in, and you almost have to know their investment thesis or criteria before you even approach them, or it's just a waste of time. And they don't really publicize that very often, right?
I mean, not really, no, they don't. Some do, but and it changes. Their investment focus can change over time. So, what they focused on, 4 to 6 years ago could be different than what it is today.
Yeah. Let me ask an open question to the group. So I talk to startups every week, and a lot of them say, "Hey, Tiger, help me raise money." And I said, "Well, I can't. I really can't help you. I'm not in that space. Is there a place for a broker, finance broker role where I could send people to, you know, call Colleen or something and try to help you navigate?"
I'm always happy to talk to companies. And I'll be very, honest with them. If they're too early stage, I mean, I'll just tell them, you need to focus on industry insiders, friends and family. You need to do whatever you can because you're too early for, most, professional investment advisors to take you to market. The one thing I will say, they're all looking for equity, right? And so, there's quite a few regulations in our country surrounding who can go out and do that and how they, if you're not licensed, you're technically not supposed to be doing that.
Okay.
So, I mean, I know there's ways around it. Companies hire individuals as consultants to make introductions and then, find a way to pay them that isn't a percentage of what's raised. But, you really got to navigate that and don't run afoul of those regulations.
So a finder's fee is kind of not really above board.
Well, if you're not licensed, if you're not if you don't have a license, to that is issued by FINRA, then in the US, there's a lot of things you can do, but what you can't do is typically get paid a flat, percentage finder's fee.
Got it.
And
And what is
companies that are some companies just aren't aware of that, right? And they find ways around it. You know, if you've raised a couple rounds and you've got lawyers involved in, preparing all the subscription docs and all of that, you would, there's representations you make to investors. Is there a financial advisor involved or not? Right. So there's some disclosures that have to be done along the way.
Yeah.
But
What
can make introductions, they can pay them a retainer, there's all kinds of ways you can, compensate people for helping you.
Tell us what FINRA means?
It's FINRA is the body of that really regulates the financial industry in the US.
Got it.
So that's really, if you're a licensed banker, then anybody can go on the FINRA website and look you up.
Got it.
So, I'd say from a company owner perspective, having access to one or a bunch of individuals who are able to support fundraising, would be valuable. It's the one kind of constant. You're trying to focus on building the business and kind of getting stuff moved. In the back of your mind, you're constantly thinking, right, how am I going to pay the staff next month?
Exactly.
It's a huge challenge. So any kind of support and networks, it's a tough thing to do to raise capital, as we just said. So any and all support from people with good kind of backgrounds, good bona fides, real professionals in the space is absolutely welcome.
All right, I'm gonna start sending everybody to Colleen.
No, well now, we don't actually work for free, but I'm happy to talk to companies and give them my perspective. At some point along the way, there is, the formal engagement process, but yeah, I mean, it's
just an introductory,
Yeah, I have introductory meetings all the time.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But even that, Colleen, is hugely valuable because I've been through this a couple of times now, and I've now got a far better idea about what looks fundable and when you can start approaching people. But I would say the first time round, clueless. And you just don't know what you don't know if you haven't got the background. So even kind of half an hour with someone who's experienced who says, hey, you're not quite there yet. You could do with hitting the next 2 or 3 milestones, then come back and have a conversation. That's super valuable because you don't necessarily, you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
That's excellent.
Yeah, another thing that's important is that med device and medtech is a little it's a little like sui generis in the sense that you go into a startup accelerator and they tell you, oh, raise pre-product and raise this, and they tell you about all these AI companies that are raising with a PowerPoint. But our industry, I think the bar that they set for investment is higher in the sense that you need at least a regulatory pathway that's clear and that you know how to do it. So I think that's it's great to have someone to support. I've had my share of crashing against the wall because I follow the normal startup path instead of trying to do an industry path.
Yeah. Well, I read something today on Facebook, not Facebook, LinkedIn, sorry. It looks so similar these days. And it was a really interesting comment that was talking about the difference between tech and health tech. And it basically said, in tech, it's all about speed. And in health tech, it's all about trust. If you go too quickly and you don't have the right product, you don't position it correctly, and you don't kind of get that customer trust because you've moved a bit too quickly, that follows you around. It's not, you can't kind of move fast and break stuff in the same way you can in the tech side of things. So it was an interesting observation.
That's a really good point.
Yeah, the other thing is that moving fast in our industry is very different from moving fast in tech. So you can be slow by tech standards and still very fast by ortho standards.
That's true. That's very true.
That's fascinating. Yeah, that is really, in the software world especially, you can iterate the product every week, and it's
my other business, Tiger, is a software business that I'm invested in and that I work in. So it's fascinating on one side having a SaaS business and on the other side. And the pace of the two businesses is just, it couldn't be different.
Yeah. And that's one of the reasons I always coach startups to don't, even when you're going through the FDA, go do a surgery in a foreign country somewhere. Get some get some feedback on your product. It's not a clinical study. It's almost like an R&D surgery, but it's so valuable because you can go to iteration 2 and 3 and 4 before you file with the FDA. Because once
We're actually doing that in the UK. So we're registered in the UK. The UK is a great market for innovation. It's an absolutely awful market for product launches because the NHS is broke. I was talking to a trust yesterday, and they're literally going around removing all the water coolers from inside the hospital because they can't actually afford to service the water coolers. That's how broke they are. But the huge benefit of the UK is one, the investment in innovation that they were prepared to make, but it's the product iteration. We're probably 4 or 5 iterations in terms of the reports that we generate as part of the algorithm that we use, and we can do that iteration. We can take it back to customers. At first it was reports too detailed, so we made it simpler. Reports too simple. So you've got a chance to go back and iterate and try so that when we are ready to launch in probably Australia next and then the US, we've got a really good feel for what is enough data for the surgeons to be able to kind of read the reports, absorb them, make decisions from the data. So it's been really useful as a test market, appalling as a commercial market, but really useful as a test market.
That's interesting. So Eminol, you were on a few weeks ago, and you sort of stress tested the U.S. business model.
Yeah, I was going to when you kind of said any more comments, I was going to say that actually, I think that's something that I'd certainly recommend that you do more of using this community, because I found it hugely valuable to get everything stress tested and get such good feedback. So. It didn't change. Let me think of a better way to explain this. So it didn't change the strategy, but if we were going north before, we're now probably going northwest. So it wasn't a complete change, but it was a very useful tweak in terms of thinking about different customer groups, thinking about positioning, thinking about pace, thinking about where we invest in getting support to look at reimbursement. So it added a huge amount of value, no doubt about it. It was very, very useful conversation.
Yeah, I mean, you get collective wisdom of hundreds of years. It's incredible. People that have started companies and hit.
I'd have
Everybody
paid
made mistakes.
I got to pay a small fortune for a consulting engagement that had given me the same quality of feedback. So we really do appreciate it.
Well, that's what BoneChat's for. Where everybody's very sharing, and they share their experience, and they're not shy.
Yeah.
They'll tell you that this is the wrong way to do it, and you need to do it this way. And Elizabeth?
Yeah, so I just wanted to share something that, while it's not connected with orthopedics this week, it is very interesting. So there is probably not a household name. This guy's name is Orlin Bethel. He's the 5th largest egg producer in the country. He had a back problem. He went to the head of spine at Pitt, and he was very happy with the results. He donated many $1 million, came back because the head of the department at June Lee and a couple of his colleagues had for years been discussing the possibility of doing a musculoskeletal biobank, but they didn't have the funding. So Orlin Bethel, all in all, gave about $45 million to school, and it's huge. Yeah. So this is an entirely new entity at Pitt. They're collecting not just tissues and data about the tissues, but they're going into this omics, like genomics, transcriptomics, or omics, proteomics, and metabolomics. This is way above my science knowledge.
That's what Eminol's here. Yeah.
Great. And so basically the thought is, let's lift patient evaluation methods sort of, out of where they have been and move them along. And, so we'll get a better idea of what one surgical method might be better than another for a given patient, so it's sort of to take down the guesswork. And I just finished up the first interview for the accompanying journal. I could probably tell the gentleman with whom I spoke, but I won't. I'll just let you guys wait. But it's basically on setting up a lab. and it's pretty new. Eminal, what can you tell us about this kind of thing?
So that's what my company does. We investigate the links between genomics and patient outcomes. So we're just in our second clinical trial now, looking at reactions to titanium and cobalt chrome in knees, and we've got very clear directional data now showing that if patients with certain alleles have worse outcomes if they have particular joints, because the joints shed metal debris. And we've now got directional data that kind of shows, using Oxford pain scores and forgotten joint scores, that pain and outcome markers are worse in patients who carry those genes. So it's fascinating stuff, and we're just starting. There's some interesting data as well to show that certain, very nascent, but that certain patients may be more susceptible to certain bugs in terms of pathogens. So it could be as well that certain folks actually should maybe avoid surgery altogether because of the risk of infection. That's very nascent. We've only just got the kit into the lab to be able to sequence the bacterial DNA, but that's another area that we're going to be looking into. So the whole genomics area it's absolutely fascinating. But
And a lot of people operating in that space.
no, it's I think there was a piece of research done in Germany. It's the only other one I'm aware of, and they couldn't find any signals, but they only had 40 patients in the study. Our first trial had 700. Our next one will have about 1,500 that we're halfway through now. So some of it is just the data. They don't know the alleles they're looking for, and the trials aren't powered sufficiently to statistically be able to separate who's got what going on.
So how do you see this area growing? I mean, how do you see this area growing, and had you heard of this new effort at Pitt?
No, I haven't heard of the new effort at Pitt, to be honest. So I think in speaking with some surgeons, it's going to take time, because a lot of people don't want to recognize. I mean, I'm looking at Vinay here. I think he said he's ex-Smith and Nephew, so this will be an area that he has some familiarity with in terms of metal allergies, etc. But because the methodologies historically to identify patients with issues were terrible, skin patch testing is terrible, LTT is terrible. It's under-recognized because loads of false positives and negatives in the testing. I think in the next 5 years, we will increasingly see people realize that actually the host response to what you're putting into the body is an important factor, and it needs to be taken more seriously.
Insurers will love that because it's got to be so cheap.
The testing's actually really not that expensive.
That's good.
If you compare it to kind of the sort of sequencing you do, it is 4-digit resolution testing. But compared to the cost of a surgery, it's pennies. So you can do it very cost effectively and potentially avoid revision surgery. So it's a fascinating area.
Wow. Well, I'll connect you with June Lee if you want over at Pitt. And
No, thank you. That sounds, if they're going to be looking to that space, we've only just kind of got ourselves registered in the US. We are working with HSS in New York, but finding more research partners would certainly be fascinating. Thank you.
Sure thing, no problem.
That's a great lead. Yeah, the cost of like doing a genomics test is just plummeted, right? It goes down 50% every year, and so it's in the future.
The cost of the kit, like the Illumina kit and the stuff you have to buy, is buttons. The issue is getting all the ISO certifications in the lab so you can actually do the testing. That can take time to get everything kind of certified and signed off and what have you. So that's a challenge. And then cost of staffing in the US compared to the UK is like 3x.
Yeah. And for everybody, for pre-op, it's a swab, it's a cheek swab, and
it's saliva sample. Yeah.
It's just like the 23andMe. If you guys have done that, you just and then for post-op, if you have potential revision, and there may be ions floating around, that's a blood test, but it's still just a blood draw.
Yeah, very straightforward.
Yeah, I mean, in 10 years, if you go do any surgery, you're gonna have they're gonna map your genome first.
I think the challenge will be in some of the kind of more switched on surgeons have said, hey, if you guys have got evidence of this and the test's available and we don't use it and someone has a reaction, then that opens us up to kind of challenges about our practices. So I think our challenge as an organization is not to be seen as ambulance chasers, but to make sure that it's available and also make sure it's available at a reasonable cost so it can be used as kind of standard of care and it's not priced at $3,000 or whatever it is they're charging for the oncology sequencing, which is crazy.
Yeah, well, they may not, we talked about this last time, they may not want to know. There's going to be a lot of hospitals that literally don't ask, don't tell.
Yep. But I think, advice, one of the first conversations that you and I had was, as much as you have to sell to surgeons, you have to make Gen Pop available, aware of this. The folks need to know what is available and what they should be considering. So there has to be that balance of, making sure surgeons are aware, but making sure that, potential patients are informed so they can make the best decision about their own care.
Yeah, terrific. All right, we're kind of going around the horn for the new people. Basically, what have you been working on the last week? Mark raised his hand.
Well, I was going to ask, see, if you could tie it to readmission rates, the hospitals would be interested.
I think we can certainly tie it to, I don't know about readmission, but certainly to follow-up rates, because the amount of folks that come back, have to be kind of investigated for pain and loosening. So I think there'd definitely be an opportunity to look at that. That's what we're seeing in the UK. A lot of people coming back, bone scans, MRIs, trying to find out what on earth's going on with the joint. It's aspirated. There's no culture negative. So selecting the right joint straight out of the gates, should reduce. But that's we're looking into an NIH study in the UK, so we can do some longitudinal work on that. I don't think that's opening until September. So we're trying to get a grant to do a kind of a long-term piece on the research there.
That's cool. We're pulling for you. I put the it's xplantlab.com. I put it in the chat.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. What else? What's going on, Karen, Mark?
Tiger, yeah, thanks for having me on, Mark. Thanks for the introduction to the group again. So yeah, in MoveUp, actually, we're in the data space. We focus on real world data for surgeons. Started by an orthopedic surgeon in Belgium, and we built a platform that captures patient data pre-operatively and right through post-operatively. We developed a virtual care platform to be able to bring efficiencies to the whole care continuum. And that was the sort of foundation of the company. And then we licensed that across Europe to hospitals, trying to tackle the US market. We built a few additional tools, getting into the AI space, focus more on the efficiencies around how AI can help onboard patients, prepare them for surgery in a better way, and also capture outcomes and problems. So we're very, very strong on that as a tool and a platform. We can give insights, benchmark patients, benchmark hospitals, regional, et cetera, et cetera. But actually, the past week was quite interesting because Mark joined us, and so we've been trying to break into the US. It's been a bit tricky actually because we're kind of unknown, and also some of the EHRs are a bit of a barrier to us, I would say. But we did have a breakthrough this week, which was kind of interesting of sorts because we got in front of surgery partners through a bit of persistence on my part, and they put it forward. A large team of VPs gave us a chance to pitch our AI tools. So we actually positioned ourselves as we presented our own AI, which and then we kind of brought in one or two that Mark knows to kind of give them a full suite. I'm not sure if the strategy worked, but it was an interesting conversation, interesting presentation. We're waiting for feedback, but we're trying to find that sort of point where we can open up, kind of find the weak point and get into a system like Surgery Partners, just focus on how we can bring efficiencies to them on, say, for example, scheduling. So, for example, if the patient interacts with a chatbot, we can phenotype the patient and then really work out quite quickly whether they should be seen, whether they are a good candidate for elective surgery for a hip or knee, or whether they should be seen by, for example, a nurse or a physician assistant, and then yeah, trying to show how we can essentially free up time for surgeons to do more procedures based on these efficiencies, both pre and post operative. And then in turn, we actually try to sell that solution to the medtech, to the ortho medtech folks. So we have a deal with Microport, for example, where we are the digital platform for their robot to prove out the efficacy of that. But anyway, we're still waiting to hear from Surgery Partners. Mark was great to help gather a couple of other resources for that, and we'll see what happens.
Good luck.
I don't know how you felt the call went, Mark, but it was a bit tricky at times, but I think we'll see.
So I felt like we were talking to people that are going to get paid whether they really move the needle or not.
Yeah.
You know, that sort of management space that's not a decision maker, but an implementer, but sometimes has to make a decision and they drag it out. So, you know, I wasn't necessarily overwhelmed by I would call it the acuity of their decision-making potential. But I don't know that's just my intuition. That's all that was.
Sounds like you just described management in every big organization.
I don't have a lot of respect for a lot of that either, as you can probably tell. But that's sort of an Achilles heel of most entrepreneurs. They're not patient with that decision process, and that's why they often lose everything.
Yeah.
So anyway, but it was a really good call. There was there was a lot of brain power, and all that AI talking to each other was pretty cool. The potential of that. Anyway,
Is the panel familiar with Tempeda and Dr. Kishore, and is he?
a little bit.
Yeah.
We have an interesting story there. Just in the last week, um, we have tied 3 different AIs together at Tempeda and to produce almost a brand new, almost something that's brand new, so that you walk into a room, you talk to your patient, your Apple Watch hears everything, and that's the ambient scribey kind of thing, and that's pretty common. There's a dime a dozen out there, okay? And they'll produce a note that'll sound pretty soapy, okay, and pretty correct. But what ours does is it takes that information, cleans it up in a very smart, doctory, medical way, and then puts that into a template that you, as the physician, have already determined is the way you actually do write your notes. So it totally customizes it to you as an individual and produces something that's quite usable. So that's AI number 1 talking to AI number 2 right there. AI number 3 takes that note and automatically puts it into your EMR as if you were looking at the EMR and clicking and moving. There's about 15, 20 clicks with getting the information from the encounter, sometimes into the EMR. And all that takes is a minute or two. And all that time is now gone. It's just really super exciting. I mean, this has been a couple of years' work to get to this point. And it's almost like technology constantly catches up to the ideas. And when it does, it's kind of magical, really. So that's where Tempeda is from last week. The thing that Surgery Partners should be interested in is, as you, of course, wisely, that's why you put us in the queue, was that Tempeda is browser-based and doesn't have to get a license or permission from the EMR to interact with it. Because no EMR, they're all siloed. No EMR wants to talk to any other EMR. Or they don't want you going in their space. It's just like the fences in the ranches and the ranch wars of Texas in the 1800s, Nobody wants you in their space. But we don't care. We just kind of run rampant over any EMR without permission, which I guarantee is they're going to hate us, which will make it kind of extra fun, I think. So anyway, that's what I've been doing, Tiger, plus a couple of other horror stories with product approval for my orthopedic business.
Value analysis committees or something else?
Yeah, I got a French company that we've been trying to get approved since last August, and it's through incompetence and missing meetings on their part and everything else. I've now have doctors that are planning on next week using it without permission.
Oh,
Hey, Mark, how do you access the EMR without permission?
Um, you pull the EMR up on your laptop or computer in your office, and this our program sits on top of it and simply moves the text, copies and pastes it into the EMR, just as if you were doing it by hand.
So in other words, the user has to log in
Browser-based.
and all of that stuff, but from that point forward, they can the EMR can be updated autonomously.
I mean, yes, the EMR. I mean, it's just like typing into the EMR, only the program is doing it for you.
But the program has been allowed in by the user, by an
Oh,
authorized user, no?
oh, the program has been the program is on that laptop by an authorized owner of that laptop or that thing. There's no authorization from the EMR. There's no license required from the EMR. So I mean, let's just say it's just like I have, I use say HubSpot CRM.
Right.
I can put this program into my on my computer, and the program can put, your name, address, information, note from our encounter into that CRM. Same thing. Yeah, it's pretty unique.
that's that's cool.
So that's what I've been doing, Tiger.
Yeah,
Can
you're
it so it's
next
putting in
week.
the
Go ahead.
just so it's putting in the information. Can it also read
Yes,
without permission?
it can also read without permission. Yes.
Okay.
Next week, license terms for all the MRs will include a human user.
You're probably right. I mean, Epic's probably big enough to pull that off.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
So Kyle teased us with a secret project a few weeks ago, but you're not really ready to talk about that again, probably. How's it going?
Good. We're in the process of having some additional conversations today and doing some traveling next week. And we've got kind of everything still on the table. So probably in 3 weeks, 4 weeks, we'll talk update. Maybe get into a bit more depth.
Cool. All right, what else? We've actually got speakers for the next 3 weeks here. We've got an AI company, we've got I call it poor man spine navigation company, and we've got a value analysis discussion. Finally talked Copeland into coming back. Teach us everything he's learned in the last year.
So, Tiger, one thing to throw out there, I guess just as an add-on to some of the things that Colleen and others were saying earlier, with Priority Medical, I have a chance to be part of Plug and Play, which is this incubating startup thing that's got a vertical in Warsaw. And we're part of the mentor team. So I got a chance to actually meet with 6 or 7 of the companies last 2 weeks ago. And it was wild because every conversation, even though we are there to talk to them about development and clearance and design controls and testing and things mechanical, biomechanical related, one of the first parts of every conversation is always, well, we sure could use your help in finding a lead investor.
Yep.
Not really what we do, but I understand it's the same theme for everybody.
Everybody I talk to is raising money or trying to raise money. It's the common theme. And everybody that's in commercial is going through value analysis committees. Those are the 2 common themes.
Yep.
It's tough out there. I talked to a startup yesterday that just got NIH funding, a lot of money. It was amazing. And I started asking questions. There's no corporate structure yet. So I said, so basically you've got a science project, right? And the founder goes, yeah, we've got a science project. And there's no employees, there's no cap table, there's no corporation, there's nothing. So
The
it's
the difference in diligence from grant funding to actual, commercial funding really does make you smile.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the problem with those grants is that when you're ready for that price round, it's a big jump.
Yeah. The grants are usually unrestricted, right? They take no equity. They're just trying to help
Well,
move things.
they're just science grants. So
Yeah.
the way they work in the UK with Innovate is you're expected to cover 30% of the costs. So for example, they'll say, right, we're going to give you £1 million grant. £1 million grant means £700,000 of Innovate money and £300,000 of your own money. So it's classed as £1 million grant, but you have to cover 30% and you have to partner with the public sector. So you have to partner with hospitals or healthcare in the UK. So there comes with some caveats, but there's no claim on IP, there's no equity. It's just very, very open. So it's superb in terms of the freedom you get to operate. But it's slow and painful working with, hospitals in the UK.
I can imagine.
But if I look at, I've never done clinical trials in orthopedics in the US, but been involved in plenty of clinical trials through my time at Pfizer in the pharma space. But let's say we've spent, for argument's sake, $4 million in the past 5 years on two kind of large clinical trials, 2,000 patients in total. That's anywhere in pharma, that's 30 million. In orthopedics, I don't know, but it's probably, if you've got a CRO doing the work for you, 15 million for 2,000 patients for recruitment and tracking. And so it's impressive how cost effective you can do a clinical trial, albeit it's slow and frustrating. But from a cost perspective, it's huge value to working in some of these markets that have supportive grant structures from the local governments.
That's an interesting insight.
Who was
Yeah.
it? Who got some money? Who got some money from the NIH, Tiger?
I can't say. It's a stealth startup.
Oh, okay. It was a conversation. Okay, never mind. Is the NIH still a thing? I didn't know. I thought that was
They are. Yeah, it surprised me. They're open for business. Yeah. And Eminol's doing it in the UK. Interesting. Well, anything else? Jesse, you've been quiet. How's
My week's been boring. I'm just dealing with vax and operational stuff. I'm in the lucky part where I didn't have to do the initial fundraising, and we're far enough along in the revenue cycle where people actually want to throw money at us. We're not asking for
Oh man, what I'd give to be in your chair right now.
it's not all roses. I mean,
Yeah, but I'll take boring, operational, and funded.
yeah, that's boring and operational at this point. Sorry.
it's a good place to be. Once you reach commercialization, you have completely different challenges. But it's a good problem.
But yeah, when Mark was talking about the value analysis and doing cases without approval, that hit me right in the heart, because that's usually how we get approval. Someone just gets fired up enough that they're just like, you know what, I'm just going to book a case and see what happens.
So you know what? I was telling the guy that called me in a panic. They're going to use it without permission, and it's not been approved. I said, you do realize that a surgeon can stick a piece of wood in you if they want to. They don't need FDA approval per se. If they judge that, I mean, all of the things that we think are actually restraints, some of those things, surgeons are able to kind of do what they want. I mean, I think people have forgotten that.
It's the same with prescribing. 65-70% of medicines are prescribed off label.
Yeah. They
Yeah.
can use, yeah, they can use almost anything off label if they judge it to be so. Now, they're
Clinical judgment.
one of the reasons why they go to school for a pretty long time is to kind of weed out the morons, but yeah.
Doesn't always work.
Doesn't always
Doesn't
work.
So Jesse and I were going back and forth in May a couple of times on glue, trying to figure out how do you use this thing?
It's you just got to play with it. It has an AI component, so it kind of creates threads for you, but you just got to play with it. Sorry about that.
No, it's
Yeah,
cool.
it's not cheap. It's like I think it's four or 5,000 a year to run the app. So
Wow.
hopefully you guys are using it. As we grow the BoneChat membership, it'll be more and more valuable too. Yeah.
Okay.
Keep trying. I'll throw the funding list or the family office list and list of VCs and stuff on Glue when we get off.
That'll make it worth it. Take care.
All right. Thanks everybody. Good
Thanks,
hour.
Thanks,
Good
everybody.
chat. Thanks. Bye for
Bye-bye.
now.